When people think about the Second World War, they usually imagine tanks rolling across Europe, bombers filling the skies, warships crossing the oceans, and soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy. They think about famous generals, dramatic battles, and political leaders whose decisions shaped the course of history. Yet hidden beneath every military victory was something far less glamorous, but equally important: production. Before an army can fight, someone must build its weapons. Before a fleet can sail, someone must manufacture its engines. Before a nation can wage war on a global scale, it must possess the industrial capacity to sustain that effort. And few individuals influenced that reality more than Henry Ford. Long before the United States became known as the arsenal of democracy, America was undergoing a transformation unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the nation experienced explosive industrial growth. Railroads connected distant regions, factories expanded across major cities. New technologies changed the way people worked, traveled, and communicated, yet manufacturing remained slow and expensive. Most products were built by skilled craftsmen who assembled items piece by piece. Production depended heavily on experience, manual labor, and time. Even as industry expanded, efficiency remained limited by traditional methods. Into this world stepped Henry Ford. Born in 1863 on a farm in Michigan, Ford grew up fascinated by machines. While many people viewed machinery as a tool, Ford saw something greater. He believed technology could transform society itself. He envisioned a future in which ordinary people would have access to products that had once been available only to the wealthy. His ambition was not simply to build automobiles. His ambition was to change how the world produced everything. In 1908, Ford introduced the Model T. The vehicle itself was revolutionary because it combined reliability, simplicity, and affordability. But the true revolution did not occur on the road, it occurred inside the factory, and Ford realized that reducing production costs would require rethinking every aspect of manufacturing. Rather than having workers move around a product, he would move the product past the workers. Each employee would perform a specific task repeatedly while the vehicle advanced through the assembly process. The result was the moving assembly line. The impact was astonishing. Before Ford's innovations, building a car could require more than 12 hours of labor. After implementing the assembly line, production times dropped dramatically. Costs fell, output surged. Vehicles that had once been luxury items became accessible to millions of Americans. By the 1920s, the Model T was not simply an automobile, it was a symbol of a new industrial age. Yet Ford's greatest achievement was not the car itself, it was the philosophy behind it. Ford understood that efficiency could be multiplied when every process was standardized. Parts were designed to be interchangeable, tasks were simplified. Waste was reduced, productivity increased, every improvement made the entire system stronger. This approach created a manufacturing model that would influence industries around the globe. The heart of this transformation was the River Rouge Complex in Dearborn, Michigan. Often described as one of the greatest industrial achievements in history, the facility represented Ford's vision taken to its ultimate conclusion. Raw materials entered one side of the complex. Iron ore, coal, rubber, and steel flowed into an interconnected network of factories, railroads, power plants, and assembly lines. Finished automobiles emerged from the other side. Few industrial operations had ever achieved such vertical integration. The River Rouge plant was not merely a factory, it was an industrial ecosystem. Observers from around the world traveled to study Ford's methods. Engineers, business leaders, government officials, and military planners recognized that something extraordinary was happening. Ford had created a system capable of producing goods on a scale previously considered impossible. More importantly, he had demonstrated that efficiency itself could become a strategic advantage. At first, few people connected these innovations to warfare. After all, Ford was building cars, not tanks. Yet history would soon reveal the military implications of his ideas. The same principles that allowed millions of automobiles to be produced efficiently could also be applied to trucks, aircraft, engines, artillery, and military equipment. The assembly line was not limited to consumer products. It was a blueprint for industrial power itself. As Europe drifted toward instability during the 1930s, nations increasingly recognized that future conflicts would not be decided solely by battlefield tactics. Modern warfare required enormous quantities of equipment. Armies consumed fuel, ammunition, spare parts, vehicles, and supplies at unprecedented rates. Victory would depend not only on bravery and leadership, but also on the ability to manufacture and deliver resources faster than the enemy. This reality transformed the meaning of power. For centuries, military strength had often been measured by the size of armies or the skill of commanders. Industrialization introduced a new variable. Economic capacity became military capacity. Factories became strategic assets. Production lines became weapons. Logistics became as important as strategy. No individual had done more to prepare America for this reality than Henry Ford. Although he could not predict the exact shape of future conflicts, his innovations fundamentally changed the relationship between industry and power. The systems he developed demonstrated how large-scale production could be organized, optimized, and expanded. The lessons learned in Ford's factories would later influence industries across the nation. By the late 1930s, the world stood on the edge of catastrophe. Adolf Hitler's Germany was rearming. Imperial Japan was expanding across Asia. Europe moved steadily toward war. In the United States, many citizens hoped to avoid involvement in another global conflict. Yet beneath the surface, America possessed an advantage that few fully appreciated. Decades of industrial innovation had created a productive capacity unlike anything the world had ever seen. At the center of that story stood Henry Ford. His assembly lines had transformed manufacturing. His philosophy had reshaped industry. His factories had demonstrated the power of efficiency on an unprecedented scale. What began as an effort to build affordable automobiles would eventually help build the logistical foundation of Allied victory. The coming war would test nations, economies, and industries on a scale never before witnessed in human history. Millions of soldiers would fight across multiple continents. Thousands of ships would cross dangerous oceans. Tens of thousands of aircraft would fill the skies. Supplying those forces would become one of the greatest logistical challenges ever attempted. And when that challenge arrived, the world would discover that Henry Ford's greatest contribution was not the automobile. It was the system. By the late 1930s, the world was changing rapidly. Across Europe, Germany was rebuilding its military machine at a pace that alarmed foreign observers. In Asia, Imperial Japan continued its expansionist ambitions. The international order established after the First World War was beginning to fracture. Yet while dictators invested heavily in tanks, aircraft, and armies, the United States remained largely focused on economic recovery following the Great Depression. Many Americans believed the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would protect them from another global conflict. Few imagined that within a few years the nation would become the largest military supplier in human history. As tensions rose overseas, military planners began to recognize an uncomfortable truth. Future wars would be industrial wars. The winner would not necessarily be the nation with the best generals or the bravest soldiers. The winner would be the nation capable of producing equipment faster than its enemies could destroy it. Every tank lost would need replacement. Every aircraft shot down would require another aircraft to take its place. Every battlefield victory depended on a continuous flow of fuel, ammunition, spare parts, food, and transportation. This was where Henry Ford's legacy became critical. Although Ford himself often held controversial views regarding international affairs, the industrial system he helped create became one of America's greatest strategic advantages. His manufacturing principles had spread throughout the economy. Assembly lines, standardization, interchangeable parts, and process optimization had become central features of American industry. Then came December the 7th, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor transformed the nation overnight. The United States was now at war. Factories that had once produced consumer goods suddenly faced a new mission. America's industrial base would become the backbone of Allied victory. The challenge was enormous. Millions of soldiers required equipment. Allies around the world required supplies. The scale of production demanded by the war exceeded anything previously attempted. Factories that had manufactured automobiles began producing military vehicles. Assembly lines designed for civilian transportation were converted into engines of war. The same principles Ford had pioneered decades earlier now served a different purpose. Speed, efficiency, standardization, and mass production became military necessities. One of the most remarkable examples was the Willow Run plant in Michigan. Built with Ford expertise and manufacturing philosophy, the facility would become legendary for producing B-24 Liberator bombers. These aircraft were among the most complex machines of their era. Traditionally, building such aircraft required highly specialized labor and significant time. Yet the application of assembly line principles dramatically increased production efficiency. At its peak, Willow Run produced bombers at astonishing rates, demonstrating that even sophisticated military equipment could be manufactured on a scale once reserved for consumer products. The implications were enormous. Germany possessed talented engineers and advanced military technology. Japan fielded highly capable forces throughout the Pacific, yet neither nation could match the sheer productive power of American industry. The United States was no longer simply building weapons, it was building them faster than anyone else. The numbers became staggering. American factories produced hundreds of thousands of military vehicles. They manufactured tens of thousands of aircraft. They launched ships at unprecedented rates. Every month, the industrial gap between the Allies and the Axis powers widened. While enemy nations struggled with shortages of fuel, raw materials, and industrial capacity, America expanded production even further. What made this achievement possible was not merely technology, it was organization. Henry Ford had demonstrated decades earlier that efficiency comes from systems. Individual brilliance matters, skilled workers matter, advanced machinery matters, but the true secret lies in coordination. Every component must arrive at the right place, at the right time, in the right quantity. This philosophy became the foundation of wartime production. The war transformed American factories into weapons of national power. Steel mills, railroads, ports, warehouses, and assembly plants became interconnected elements of a single massive machine. Millions of workers participated in an industrial effort unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. Men and women who had never carried a rifle nevertheless played essential roles in defeating the Axis powers. By 1943, the results were undeniable. America had become what President Franklin Roosevelt famously called the arsenal of democracy. Its factories supplied not only American forces, but also allied nations fighting across multiple continents. Trucks built in American factories operated in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. Aircraft assembled thousands of miles from combat zones flew missions over Germany and Japan. The production miracle had become a military miracle. The transformation from cars to war machines was complete. Yet producing equipment was only half the battle. Building weapons means little if they cannot reach the front lines. The next challenge would prove equally important: logistics. Throughout history, countless armies have been defeated, not because they lacked courage, but because they lacked supplies. Food, fuel, ammunition, transportation, and maintenance determine whether military operations succeed or fail. Napoleon famously observed that an army marches on its stomach. During the Second World War, armies marched on something even larger: logistics. As American production surged, military planners faced a daunting question. How could millions of tons of supplies be moved across oceans, continents, deserts, mountains, and battlefields? Producing equipment was one challenge. Delivering it was another entirely. The answer relied upon a logistical system of extraordinary scale. Railroads carried raw materials to factories. Factories transformed those materials into vehicles, aircraft, weapons, and supplies. Trucks transported finished products to ports. Cargo ships carried them across oceans. Upon arrival, additional transportation networks distributed them to combat units. Every link in the chain mattered. The principles pioneered by Henry Ford played a crucial role in this process. Standardization simplified repairs. Interchangeable parts reduced maintenance complexity. Efficient production allowed damaged equipment to be replaced quickly. The same ideas that had made automobiles affordable now help sustain military operations across the globe. Nowhere was this more evident than during preparations for D-Day. The Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944 required one of the largest logistical operations in history. Thousands of ships crossed the English Channel. Millions of tons of supplies followed behind the assault forces. Tanks, trucks, fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and engineering equipment had to arrive continuously. The invasion itself lasted only hours. The logistical effort lasted months. Once Allied forces established a foothold in France, they required constant resupply. This challenge gave rise to one of the most famous logistical operations of the war. The Red Ball Express. Thousands of trucks operated day and night, transporting critical supplies from coastal ports to advancing armies. Drivers worked under immense pressure. Roads became crowded arteries of war. Without these supply lines, Allied offensives would have stalled. German commanders increasingly recognized a devastating reality. They could still win tactical engagements, they could still inflict casualties, but they could not match Allied production and logistics. Every German tank destroyed represented a significant loss. Every Allied tank destroyed could often be replaced. This imbalance extended far beyond armored vehicles. Aircraft production favored the Allies. Shipbuilding favored the Allies. Fuel production favored the Allies. Transportation capacity favored the Allies. Industrial logistics had become a decisive weapon. American railroads played a vital role in this system. Thousands of locomotives transported materials across the continent. Ports operated around the clock. Liberty ships crossed dangerous waters carrying essential cargo. Factories maintained continuous production schedules. Millions of workers contributed to an interconnected network supporting military operations worldwide. And by 1945, the results were overwhelming. Allied armies possessed superior mobility, superior supply capacity, and superior industrial support. The battlefield reflected a deeper reality. Victory was being manufactured thousands of miles away in factories, shipyards, rail yards, and warehouses. The Second World War demonstrated a lesson that military planners continue to study today. Firepower matters, leadership matters, strategy matters, but logistics determines whether those advantages can be sustained. And modern logistics, in many ways, traced its origins back to the industrial systems pioneered by Henry Ford. The war was won by soldiers, but it was sustained by supply chains. When the Second World War ended in 1945, much of the world lay in ruins. Cities had been destroyed, economies had collapsed, entire nations faced the challenge of rebuilding from devastation. Yet amid the destruction, one lesson stood out clearly. Industrial capacity and logistical efficiency had become essential elements of national power. The systems pioneered by Henry Ford did not disappear when peace returned. Instead, they evolved and expanded into nearly every aspect of modern life. Manufacturing industries adopted assembly line principles. Global corporations embraced standardization and efficiency. Supply chains stretched across continents. The same concepts that once produced automobiles and military vehicles began shaping the global economy. Today, many of the world's largest companies operate according to principles Ford helped popularize. Products move through highly coordinated networks. Components arrive precisely when needed. Warehouses, transportation systems, and production facilities function as parts of larger interconnected systems. Whether purchasing goods online or receiving international shipments, consumers experience the legacy of logistical innovations first developed over a century ago. Military organizations continue to rely upon these principles as well. Modern armed forces understand that wars are won, not only through technology and tactics, but through sustainment. Fuel, maintenance, transportation, communication, and supply remain as important today as they were during World War II. The ability to move resources efficiently remains one of the defining characteristics of military power. Perhaps this is Henry Ford's greatest legacy. He did not simply change manufacturing, he changed how societies think about production, organization, and efficiency. His ideas transformed factories. Those factories transformed logistics. And those logistics helped transform the outcome of the most destructive conflict in human history. When people remember World War II, they often remember generals, politicians, and battles. Yet behind every victory stood an invisible network of workers, engineers, managers, railroads, ports, trucks, ships, and factories. It was a system built upon principles that Henry Ford helped bring into existence. In the end, the story of Henry Ford is not merely the story of an automobile manufacturer, it is the story of how one man's vision of efficiency reshaped industry, strengthened nations, and helped create the logistical foundation upon which modern power still rests. The tanks, aircraft, and ships may have won battles, but the system won the war.